Hello. So today we're going to talk about the first record we bought. I'm Brew. I'm joined by Bruce, my dad, and yeah. So for this category, first record you ever bought, we're saying it's got to be like from your own money. So like in my case, like saving up your pocket money and then going to the local record store and buying it. And for you, was it like you weren't sure which one you bought because it was so long ago because you're so old?
Yeah,
is that right?
It's more than 3 years ago now. So
Oh.
yeah,
Wow, it's 4 years ago, wasn't it?
yeah, it's a long time ago. So I actually can't really remember, to be honest, what the first album was that I bought. But this will be the one I've chosen. Will be an early one.
So was it between this one and a few others? And if so, what were these other ones? And
unfortunately, I can't remember what the other ones might have been. I mean, I did buy quite a few albums, over the years. As to what was bought when, I don't really know. So, but this will have been an early one that I've chosen. So, I think it'll fit the bill close enough for the purposes of what we're trying to do.
Yeah. So then, without any further ado, I'm going to introduce you to the first record I ever bought. It is Polythene by the Welsh band Feeder. I bought this record at my local record store. It was like in Redhill. It was the MVC or whatever it was called before that. Probably because of like the exposure I'd had to like some of their pop hits, which came from the later album Echo Park. They were very popular and about on the MTV or like maybe on the radio and stuff as well. And I love this artwork. There's so much beautiful color in here, and so much going on as well. Look at how like it took me forever to notice that the guy here, like there is a guy there, and they're like sort of horribly sort of distorted. Like, I didn't notice that to begin with, and then like you got the sort of themes of sort of radiation. Look, this just says radiation to you straight up. And how cool is this parachuting guy in like a bag for a fish, and all the beautiful colors here. So that probably really stood out to me, and I still love that to this day. So that's probably why I picked that record rather than maybe the one with the hits I knew. A bit about Feeder, often described as Britpop, but I actually kind of think of them more as like an alt rock or like a pop rock band. And I followed them in my record collection. You can see sort of behind me up until just after their drummer, John Lee, died. And that was probably like the peak of their career. Like they just had the success of the single Just a Day and like their highest charting single from Echo Park, Buck Rogers. And this was like a really commercially successful. So in my record collection, I've got like the expanded version of the early EP Swim, which I feel it feels more like an album. It's got like a few of the tracks from Polythene, but it's like its own thing and worth collecting. Then Polythene, the more pop punky Yesterday, Went Too Soon, the classic Echo Park, and then the more sort of beautiful and introspective Comfort in Sound, which I wasn't very into at the time because it didn't give me like the heavy highs like the lead single Come Back Around did. Like it's a much more quiet, thought out, beautiful and introspective album than giving you something heavy, which is what I was after at the time, especially like given like the opening single. So I see this record, Chris Sheldon produced it, by the way, done like loads of good records, like the first 3 Biffy Clyro albums, the first 3 Ocean Size records. I think he's worked with like Foo Fighters as well and like, some other like big bands. This is like more of a grunge record to me than like sort of poppy perhaps, but there are still pop gems on it. The gentle ones like Suffocate and High. But if you just listen to like the bridge of My Perfect Day or the simple hook, Cement, or the chorus in Forgive, they've always had this amazing pop sensibility, which I think is a brilliant thing for like your first record. I want to give a shout out to Taka Hirosa, like the bassist, because he is effortlessly cool. He's always looked really cool in the videos. and like live. It's just evident in this one, especially in my track which I picked for you to listen to, Descend, which has the wailing guitars and powerful use of falsetto in the choruses. Like it starts with like that deep bass line, so that sort of drew me to that song initially.
Well, I'd never heard Feeder before, so it was a new venture for me.
Hi there. Well, I'm about to listen for the very first time to a band called Feeder and a track called Descend, which is Bru's choice of album. It's the first album that he remembers ever buying. When I say it's the first time I've heard it, I don't know if that'll be the case. I've probably heard it in the background when he's been playing it when he was young, and probably switched it off in my mind. But I'm going to listen to it properly this time and let you know what I think of it as I'm playing it. Good intro, settling in nicely, quite engaging vocal with the tune.
In fact, probably, I guess almost all the music that we're going to be sharing, the stuff that you come forward with, I probably won't. I might have heard it in the background when you were growing up, but I just don't remember. Probably won't remember much of it.
Pleasantly surprised. Oh no! Here we go. Here comes the shouting. This is what I remember.
I was surprised how much I enjoyed Descend. I had to listen. Well, I always have to listen to music a lot more than once normally, just to be able to enjoy it. For me, I know some people seem to enjoy music straight away, but for some reason I need to have something in some kind of framework or something in my mind, and then get to enjoy it. And in fact, the songs that last longest for me, the ones that I enjoy most, are the ones that I can listen to many times on.
I totally feel you with that.
So I enjoyed listening to Descend. I find it difficult to know how to describe it, but there were some good variations in it, and it's kind of like there's some builds and then changes in it. And I actually wanted to go back. I'd heard it 2 or 3 times. I wanted to go back and hear those particular bits again.
Good high note there. Feel carried along. I like this gentle continuity. And then it gets broken again. Actually, the contrast is pretty impressive. It's all working together well.
Quite often you get music that takes from other bands or other, even from classical music. You don't realize that you're kind of subconsciously sampling it, I suppose, in a sense. And but a couple of bits in Descend that satisfied the soul, I thought, which was musically touched.
On that song, like that's one of the more deeper cuts, and across the album there is like some variety.
Yes.
So like the heavy, which I'm really into, that's brought on tracks like Radiation, Tangerine, and Stereo World, but they always have that pop sensibility to them. So they often have like a really easy to digest refrain. Throughout this record, I love how Grant Nicholas has this understated vocal style.
I like the vocals.
Yeah. And one last thing, just the snare sound and that drum beat on high. Oh, it's mint. I absolutely love it. Like it just sounds so good. So like almost metallic and just crisp. Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
And then I was going to say about the closer, 20th Century Trip. This kind of took me out of it, and like, so it's a very dreamy sort of song, but it really abruptly ends after having like an accelerated or an accelerating distortion sort of feedback series, and it's sort of in contrast to the mood that the song sets. So end of the album, and it gets you into this sort of bliss state, and then like this circling, accelerating feedback, and then this just ends, and that sort of had an impact on me as well. So I thought I'd mention that part of the record as well, because that was a really interesting bit to me. So Feeder, I've seen them a bunch of times, despite perhaps being like maybe a bit put off by their popularity and the kinds of venues that they play as a result of that, like being very large and perhaps a bit soulless.
I'm just imagining them live.
Every time you see them, the thing that hits me is just the staggering amount of good songs they have. Grant Nicholas is just a brilliant songwriter. And as a result, in their career, they've had like a lot of longevity. They've had 40 singles, which is a lot. Yeah, 40. 25 of those have reached top 75 in the UK, and they're still going strong. 2019, they put out a record called Tallulah, and that reached number 4. So they've stood the test of time, and I think it's the songwriting of Grant Nicholas that has allowed them to do that. One time there was, I was watching them at Leeds Festival, like Reading and Leeds, and come towards the end of their set, which I already knew, and I was about, they were like urging people, right, now you need to go, guys. Like, I know we've got like a bit more longer to play, but you need to go and watch At the Drive-In, guys. I was like, yep, that's what I'm going to go and do. But like that sort of humbleness and that passion for music is sort of evident.
I find it interesting that you chose, well, I think you described you like the kind of heavier side, because I as I was going through, I thought, well, I'll just tick off the ones that I think are prime tracks.
I think I can guess what these would be, but go ahead.
I should get you to write down or whatever. So the two that I picked out were High, and Suffocate.
Yeah.
I did like Descend. In fact, you know, there's something worthwhile in every track. I really enjoyed the journey of coming across a band that I wasn't familiar with, and High, you know, which is about, if I understand it correctly, and generally speaking, I'm not very good with lyrics. I tend to go more for the music than the lyrics. But you know, this is about, you know, hanging out with your friends and getting high. But it wasn't in any way, you know, a lot of these kind of drug type things are they're pretty grim. It was just just going to have a really nice time with my friend. It made me think of you know, when I was said at university or something, and I had a very close friend there. It was just great, you know, just always wanted to be with that friend. We happened not to be taking drugs, but there you go. We kind of had our own friendship, you know, without those kind of things. But it was just great to have somebody you felt totally relaxed with, and I thought that came over in High. So I like that.
That's really, really cool. That's one of the reasons why I like that song. It makes me just think of being young and hanging out with my friends in the park.
But when I tried to work out what was going on in Suffocate, I had to go away and you know, check out what the lyrics were, and I still couldn't make very much head or tail. I thought it would be about, you know, feeling oppressed by you know, just by life, and I couldn't quite get that when I was reading through lyrics. And I tend not to invest too much time in lyrics, so if it doesn't come to me, it doesn't hit the mark, then I don't follow up. But what I did think, and I was going out for my COVID walk this afternoon, and I was reflecting on those two songs, and it made me think of so when I was a student, although it had been out for a while, the film version of Quadrophenia came out, and this album as a whole speaks to me of young people finding their feet in life. And you know, that's really about what Quadrophenia is, a young man. He's in a very difficult, you know, much more turgid environment and all the strain and stress of it. But there's the song "Can You See the Real Me?" He's asking the doctor and he's asking the preacher, because he can't find the real me himself. Right. And then there's also the drug. There's a drug song, "Out of My Brain on the Train on the 5:15." It's a more gutsy type of album, and this is a much more enjoyable album, I think. You know, you come away with a brighter perspective.
It's really interesting how you've paired it and you've drawn the parallels. So, talking of good albums and great bands, should we go over to your pick for first record you ever bought?
My choice. So this is the one that I wasn't entirely sure that I had actually bought it as my first album. So I'll hold it up. I don't know whether it will be too much reflection. So that is Led Zepp. In fact, we call it Led Zepp 1, but I think it's just called Led Zeppelin because it was their first album under that particular name. And that's the kind of standard Atlantic image that we used to have on the album. It'd be the same kind of look on the album when I bought it, and a picture of all members of the band. Now they came out. They came out the same. I think they called themselves the New Yardbirds or something before they became
Yeah, so
became
that was
Led
Page's
Zeppelin.
band before Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, I've
And
heard. Yeah.
he could continue to get paid gigs and tour if he recruited people sort of to play under that name.
What was interesting about when you were introducing your Feeder album was that you say, you listen to the album, you've seen them a number of times. Well, because I lived on an island, there was no bands, or hardly any bands ever came over, so I never really saw much in the way of bands until managed to go on to college and uni and whatever. And then that was, for me, that was the kind of like the punk type era just coming through. But as you know, before then, which is really where most of my my musical exploration occurred, growing up to university, to the end of university kind of time, I felt I'd lived in quite a rich musical scene, and Led Zepp is one of the greats. For me, when it comes to rock bands, and you could argue certainly on this album, there's blues, even a little bit of folk in there. That in terms of rock bands, they are the best of breed for me. And this was a great starter album. All the tracks are very good, and there's some stunners. The Dazed and Confused, I think, would have been used in their concerts. I mean, it's just fantastic for that.
Dazed and Confused became the sort of centerpiece of their early concerts.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Yeah.
So I read a book on their early days of touring, and it logs how the song morphed and changed over time, and the set became built around that track, and how it became this sprawling, massive epic, and
that makes
guitar
sense.
Techniques that Page would experiment with, and how that became the biggest sort of part of their set.
Well, I've heard one of their live albums, which, I mean, some of the tracks just go on forever. And to be fair, I think that would have worked live, but they didn't quite work as well on the album.
And there's a really good cover of it by Cave In, which got me into that song as well.
By who?
Cave In.
Oh, no, I don't know them. Yeah.
Is
it a very similar style? Is it still kind of rock, slightly bluesy?
They're a sort of post-hardcore band, but they sort of stick true to the song. Maybe not as good as the original, but definitely worth having a listen to. And it got me into that song and to this album, to be fair. So.
Yeah, I quite like covers on the whole. They, but it's very difficult to improve on an original. But sometimes covers have to be substantially different to have it to take the things that are real merit within the song and find creative outlets around them. So it'd be interesting to hear whether anybody actually has done, a very good alternative to that. Anyway,
don't they have one or two covers on this record as well?
Well,
here we go.
They were a band noted for stealing things, I think, in one form or another. But I think yes. Well, they're written by other people, some of the tracks. So yeah, there would be covers. So the album kind of starts off, goes straight in with good times, bad times.
Mm-hmm.
And you are just straight in with powerful guitar, dancing bass, and those Robert Plant vocals are fantastic. And I gather it's it was a single at the time as well, or one of their singles. Now, one of the things I like about Led Zeppelin, generally about my musical taste, was that, as you were saying earlier, when you start off, you listen to pop music, and I've always liked pop music, because it's pop and it's attractive, it's easy and whatever. But definitely for me, it was the albums that did it, because they were you could go on a longer journey, with the group, and really find out how they're stretching themselves, and are they able to create for over a broader landscape than just the singles. Having said that, one hit wonders are still one hit wonders, so they are of value, but they're not necessarily great artists. Zeppelin were very much an albums band, and they had this splendid irony. The theme tune for Top of the Pops was actually a cover version of a Led Zeppelin song.
Led Zeppelin pushed for people to listen to their albums. They were an album band. They did this by not titling their records, by just having numbers and symbols, or by just having it self-titled, or by not even having the name of the band on the sleeve.
On the fourth one.
How are you going to know who it is? How are you going to know what the product is?
In terms of albums, I think one is just such a good starting album. 2 is a very good album, I think. 3 dipped a little bit for me, and then you get into that bit where they produce their album. We call it Led Zepp 4 or 4 or whatever, but actually it is, as you say, untitled, and they even wanted to have a blank, cover or something. So but they didn't manage to achieve that. But interestingly, at that point, that was when, that album is for me the best album, and it's got the very well known Stairway to Heaven on it. But to be fair, as the Led Zepp 1 is a fantastic starter album, and you could listen to that if you're into rock, you can listen to that many times and enjoy it all the way through. All the time, but it's got bluesy back. You've got the bluesy background coming in.
Yeah, so the blues tracks I thought were "I Can't Quit You, Babe" and "You Shook Me." Those were just completely these are blues numbers.
Yeah, you've got acoustic in there as well, which is nice. And of course they chose a really stonking cover with the Zeppelin catching fire, the Hindenburg
down in flames. Wow.
Yeah, that must have annoyed some people, I think. As a rock band to go out to do.
Provoking, making people have a reaction, aren't they?
Yeah, that's great. What a great name for a band. You just, Zeppelin. You think of you think of something huge, and then Lead, not just huge but heavy, and there it is. There it is, exploding as well on the cover.
Just looking at the iconic cover of the Zeppelin going down in flames reminds me of the iconic cover to fucking Rage Against the Machine. I've got it here. The Monk on Fire.
So that's a really good cover.
Let's talk a bit about your picks. So you picked out 2 tracks for me. Wouldn't have been what I probably would have gone for. For me, the essential tracks of this record are "Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You" and "Dazed and Confused."
I picked out "Communication Breakdown," didn't I? For you?
Did. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Oh well, it's just it's just as soon as this track starts, you're hammered.
Love the start, just chugging straight into it. This song is just about energy, isn't it? About the energy it brings.
With a guitar.
Sick solo. Cool how the solo carries on into the chorus. Love that.
And it just takes you are on a journey straight away. And it's a short track, so if I remember rightly, it's a short track.
A lot of the vocals are just wailing, aren't they? Plant sings pretty high, doesn't he?
And it's just great rock. You want to change from the day, particularly when you've got the energy of youth, and you put that on, and you are, your heart is racing, your blood is coursing around your veins. And what I seem to remember when I bought that album, that one of the tracks was advertised as being, just a few minutes long or something like that. But when you played this track, it was very long. Now, you might think, oh, well, that's just, what probably was just a mistake on the sleeve. I now cannot identify, because I don't have the physical album anymore. I've only got the CD version, but I cannot remember which track it was. And so I used to call it something like the 2 minute, 6 minute track, because it was advertised as slow, and then it was longer. But what was interesting is that both my brother and I were really interested in music and into music. And one of the because albums were very expensive, relatively speaking, in those days. You were forking out a lot of money. You had to if you had a kind of a job as a youngster, you'd have to save up for a while to be able to buy a whole album. That then meant that they possibly had they were more precious. And one of the things that we were precious about was how long the albums were. And if the album, you expected 20 minutes each side, and if the album didn't give you 40 minutes, you felt, even if it was a great album, that you'd been squizzed in some way. This album came in under 40 minutes until you actually played it, because of this track that was longer. Then it came in over 40 minutes. So suddenly I felt slightly more relaxed about, about it meeting that 40-minute rule. The other track that I recommended for you was Black Mountainside, and it's a bit of let's wait and see as to why I chose that. It's based on you can hear it. It's quite folky in its, and it's terrifically played by Page. It's mainly a kind of guitar solo
using like a hammer-on sort of technique. Just trying to figure out what time signature this is in. Sounds pretty random. This is mad. I don't remember this track at all.
And it's a really good track. By wait and see, what I mean is, if we carry on running through these programs, we'll be doing different themes each time with the albums. There's an interesting bit of background to this particular track.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Are you going to give John Bonham some love? Because his drums are just thunderous.
Well, the drums and the John Paul Jones bass as well. It's the whole togetherness of real rock, isn't it? I mean, and some of those drum solos that he did on the tracks, and I couldn't name you the tracks, and I gather that his live performances were phenomenal. Well, actually, they come to the foreground a lot in Led Zeppelin, but drums in the background are, it's more difficult to appreciate that. I suppose if you're a drum player or a bass player, then that actually helps. It means you get more depth of insight as to what's going on behind the scenes. But Led Zeppelin 1, that first album, the bass work is there's some good solo-y type bits or sections that are
John Paul Jones is an incredible multi-instrumentalist. He can play, and does on their records, plays a lot of different instruments. I remember I went to uni with this guy called Michael Giverin, who's now professional mandolin player, and he does these courses where all the best players get together, and John Paul Jones comes along and just tries as well. Apparently he's not that good at this instrument, but he just does it for casual, for fun or whatever. Yeah,
well, I suppose if you've got the skill in a one or two or three instruments, and particularly if they're kind of related, like a mandolin would be related, and what a wonderful thing to explore all those different variants of that instrument, or if you've got skills even other instruments. Like the Beatles going off and kind of George Harrison playing sitar and things like that. It's it must be a great adventure.
All right, well, thank you for sharing your first record with me. I found it really interesting, and I liked going back, and I really enjoyed this record. Not my favourite Led Zeppelin. I think I prefer their later stuff, but this record definitely rocks. And the blues are interesting, and the tracks you picked out were super interesting ones as well. So yeah, really good.
Oh, well, I've enjoyed doing the listening to Feeder for effectively the first time, and the whole idea of joining in with what was your journey in listening to music. It's nice to have shared journeys.
Well, I have to say I'm pleasantly surprised. I really quite enjoyed that. I'm pleased to have had a chance to listen to it. I might never have listened to it without this particular forum. So